this webinar. Thank you so much for joining. One of the most precious commodities right now is time. And so I thank you very much for spending a little bit of time here with me. This is Breaking the Mother-Daughter Diet Cycle. That's the name of it because I'm a mom. But it also includes dads and sons, teachers, coaches, anybody that works with children, so we are trying to really shift the way that we live so that our children don't have to live under this diet culture that has kind of been umbrellaed, I guess, over society today. So I'm going to get started and share a little bit of information for you, and I hope you can keep your mind open, look at things maybe from a different perspective. There's probably lots of other things that I could cover here today, but this is kind of the beginning point, right? The jump off point, the starting of this particular space. Okay, I have a question. Let me see. I can't hear you. Okay, that is good to know. Hold on one second. So what I'm going to do, okay, so let me see if this is better. So if someone could write in and see if they can hear me better with the headphones on. I've been having a little bit to see if that's working better. So thank you for sharing that with me. Yes, okay, perfect. Thanks for sharing that so that I could I'll get us kind of started again. But thank you for being here. That's the number one point, is thank you for being here, and to keep your mind open and hopefully look at things from a different perspective or hear something new that you hadn't thought about before. And that's really the key, is to start to shift our thought process around all of this. So let's get started. You're in the right place if you're a mom, you're a daughter, you're a sister, all of the above. You work with children, or you care about our future and you care about the direction of our future when it comes to food, eating, weight, and body image. Children are like sponges. They hear and observe everything. They hear what you say. They hear how you talk to yourself. They see what you do. They notice how you treat yourself. They notice how you treat others or speak to others. So just a real important piece of this equation is the fact that they are watching, and they notice much more than we think that they do. And so that's why our own behavior can make such a big impact on our children. So I want to share, I'm going to start with a quick story around this. And it's about a mom who is baking a ham, for a holiday dinner. And the daughter asks, some of you may have heard this, the ham story. The daughter asks, she cuts the two ends off and she puts it in the oven. She says, "Why do you cut the two ends off?" And the mom says, "I don't know. Mom used to do that, or grandma used to do that. So let's give her a call." So the daughter calls grandma and says, "Grandma, why did you cut the ends off the ham before you cooked it?" And the grandmother says, "I don't know. Great grandma used to always do that." And in this story, luckily, great grandma is alive. And so let's call her. So they call great grandma and ask her, "Great grandma, why do you cut the ends off the ham?" And great grandma says, "So that it would fit in the oven." And so for generation after generation after generation, this particular action was done because it was practical at the time, but now the ovens are bigger, and so it doesn't need to be done that way. So that's just a typical example of how we watch someone's behaviors, the way they speak, the way they speak to themselves, the way they act towards themselves, the way that they feed themselves or exercise, any of those things. We take that, our children take that in. So that's why this is so important. In society today, we are, it's a heightened diet society still. Even though we know and you hear research is saying, 95 to 98% of diets don't work. A person diets to change their body and their body size. And yet you can't go anywhere today not hearing people speak about a particular diet or lifestyle plan that they're on. And if you think about lifestyle plan, if it's eliminating food that a person has to eliminate for the rest of their life, that's a diet, especially if the result wanted is weight loss. So today's objectives: awareness of adult behaviors that children notice, like, and I call them mom's mistakes, right? Mom's mistakes, but I did my fair share, right? So this is why it's so important for me. Understanding why dieting's not the answer. And then to discover and learn a few new ways to model supportive behavior for our own children and for, this next generation growing up. So let's start with some stats. The desire to be thin has its greatest growth for girls between the ages of 5 and 8, strongest at the age 6. You think about that, that's when they're getting into first grade. So this is an important piece. And there's a desire for muscularity in boys at about this 8 to 9 year age. So it's not just girls. I kind of focus on moms and daughters here, but this goes with boys as well. The number one wish for girls, 11 to 17, is that they could be thinner. And you see that today in today's society. Social media is all over the place. That's all they see. 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies. 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of being fat. These stats are scary stats. 97% of women actually have that I hate a part of me, or I don't like something about my body, a negative self-talk about their bodies every single day. And then if we repeat the same negative self-talk day after day after day, which is that's what the studies say, research says 80 to 90% of what we said yesterday, we say today, it builds some really strong pathways in our brain. And then, of course, this diet industry is a $70 billion, it topped from $60 to $70 billion in a year industry. If you add beauty onto that, when you think about beauty standards, and you add that on top, it goes over $200 billion. If we could start one by one, one person at a time, starting to accept themselves as they are and not buy into this diet industry and the beauty industry as much, imagine what we could actually impact those industries, which would mean they would lose money, which would mean they would not be around as long. So there's a lot of things, if you throw a rock into the water, there's lots of ripple effects from all of this. So I want to talk about the Fiji study, which I found extremely fascinating. This is the effects of media on a society and a culture. So in Fiji, in 1995, they were free from eating disorders. There was no TV, and they were free. So that means 0 cases. So a group of students went in and did a 3-year study in Fiji. 1995, 0. No eating disorder at all. TV was introduced in 1995. By 1998, only 3 years later, 69% of 17-year-olds had been on diets. That's a significant increase in 3 years. And it's about 45% that were showing disordered eating patterns, like purging. So those are in just 3 years, 69% increase of dieting and 45% increase of disordered eating patterning. Some of that, I don't have the stat of actual eating disorders, clinical eating disorders, but the stat for disordered eating and purging, 45%. So this just talks about how the effect that media can have on a society. And if you think about our society today, it is full It is on overload. It is everywhere you look. So it's no wonder there's this desire, this thin ideal, or this desire for thinness that starts at 5 to 8 years old. And when we think about different cultures and beauty in these trends, if we think back, there's a great YouTube clip, I'm not sure what the name of it is, but there's a great YouTube clip that shows different body types through the ages. And so if you think about what was beautiful, what was considered beautiful in the Renaissance, what was considered beautiful 1910, 1920, 1930, 1940, it's shifted almost every decade. There's been a new ideal, body ideal, and women altering themselves and working really hard to fit into the ideal, only to see it changing. And we are all in different types of bodies. You hear the stories of the women in China binding their feet, right, to make their feet small, because that's the ideal in that culture. So really understanding that this changes all the time, and we are all different. So it's no wonder that children are leaning in to what's considered ideal. And what we want to try to do is open up their eyes. That's a vision, right? A narrow perspective. And we want to open up the perspective so they see more, they see wider, they see different bodies as beautiful. So a little bit about my own story and why I'm so passionate about this. And I'm not going to go into this a lot, but I do want to share that my own story growing up in a home of restriction created a space where dieting was encouraged. It was something that I started when I was 10. The first diagnosed eating disorder, clinical eating disorder, now on record is 9 years old. I started dieting at 10. I know many, many people that have started dieting even before that, of the people that I work with, and clinical anorexia at 12. And so for basically the next 35 years, I was in disordered eating patterns, behaviors. And with that, I remember thinking when I was pregnant, it was the one time, this 9-month period, that I was free to eat whatever I wanted, and it didn't matter. I remember it specifically. So I would have, I had 2 children, and then as they grew up, the mistakes that I made as a parent, because I was worried about my weight, my own self-talk, my own restriction of food or shifting of food. So because I grew up in a restricted environment, I continued to hold on to restriction for myself, yet didn't want to do that for my children. So food was whatever they wanted. So it was kind of an open door with food. And so it's just interesting how, because we don't want to be treated sometimes the way that we were treated, but that wasn't the greatest either, because there was still what they saw. They could still see my behaviors. And so because of this, about 6 years ago, I made a shift. And that's when I started to get educated on all of this. I went back to school, got my eating disorder specialist certificate from Plymouth State, and just dove into all of it. The body image work, the intuitive eating work, self-care, self-talk, really trying to understand it all. So that's why this is so important. And the fact that I know that I gave a disservice to my own children. So, and I'm trying to change that, right? And model a different behavior. So let's talk a little bit about the disconnect. How does this disconnect happen? What are some of the things that have happened to you? So you can think back, here's just a couple of examples. When it was 5 o'clock and you asked for a snack, you asked your mom for a snack. Was it, it's too close to dinner. You don't want to spoil your appetite. So if you're hungry and you're asking for a snack, there's a disconnection all of a sudden to your own internal hunger. So you're hungry, don't eat yet. It's like, you're not hungry, wait till dinner. So that's a shift of our own disconnect. when you sat and ate at the dinner table but still had food on your plate but you were full, then usually what was happening from either mom or dad, finish your plate. I just heard a story the other day. A client was telling me that anything that the child didn't eat at night, usually vegetables, was served to her for breakfast the next morning. And that's what she ate for breakfast the next morning. So talk about, you know, a dysfunction, right? Or a hatred with vegetables. Like, why wouldn't you not like vegetables if you have to eat them every single morning because you're not eating them at night? How was food used in your environment? Was it a punishment? No, you can't have dessert until you finish this. Was it a reward? Oh, if you get an A, we'll take you out to dinner or go get ice cream. So it becomes something other than fuel. It becomes, you know, a punishment or a reward. What happened if you didn't finish your dinner? What kind of things happened? I've had some horrific stories about having to sit for hours on end at a dinner table. So there's all kinds of things that happen like that we want to keep an eye on. Oops, hold on a second. I saw another question. So I'm gonna just, a participant said, my mom portioned my meals, so I have never had a chance to know my own hunger. There you go. There's another example of having, not understanding, like there's a disconnect from hunger and a disconnect from fullness. And then we layer over what we were talking about before, this projection from parents on how you should eat, what you should eat, how you should look, right? Let's keep going. Children who grow up, and this is a general statement, in an environment where one or both parents value and embrace dieting, restriction, good or bad food choices, and weight loss, usually take one of two paths. Now, when we say this, you know, this is kind of a general statement. There are two main paths. There are mixed paths. These two paths come together and may cross and intertwined as well. And there might be some little offshoots of this, but this is the majority will take one of these two paths. So let's talk about them for a second. The two paths become the chronic dieter and the chronic rebeller. And so you can see, I know for myself as a kid, I intertwined with both of these. The chronic dieter is always on a diet, off a diet, searching for the next diet. Circle back to the beginning when we were talking about bodies for a second. The reason that we go on a diet, or that we've been taught to go on a diet, is to lose weight, to change our body, to look and fit into the beauty standard or the ideal of this, of today. When we diet, we're talking about the physiological effects also of dieting. And I have, if you're interested in going into more detail there, I do have another webinar, Death to the Diet. Feel free to reach out and I can send that along. But we know that diets don't work. And yet this chronic dieting is one of the paths that children who grow up in restriction go. The other one is the chronic rebeller. Don't tell me what to do, and going the opposite direction. You know, I remember going to the neighbors and eating their sugary cereal because we didn't have any at our house, right? So anytime that we went away, I was looking and foraging for kind of food. What can I eat here? Rebelling against the diet. So before I started my diet, I was the chronic rebeller, and then I became the chronic dieter. And then I rebelled against myself. So, you know, it's just a very interesting going back and forth on this teeter-totter between this chronic dieter and chronic rebeller. And neither one, right, are a supportive and healthy relationship with food and body. So let's talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that we make. And just noticing them becomes awareness, and I hate the word mistake, but because it's a mistake, like we're learning something from it, and it allows us to grow and it allows us to shift. If we don't realize that this particular behavior is harmful for ourselves or for others, then we don't have the opportunity to change it or make a shift. So this is a note to, this is for moms and for dads, and it's just for knowledge, it's for understanding, and it's for forgiving ourselves for any kind of mistakes that we've made in the past, and how can we, now that we understand a little bit more, what shifts can we choose to make. And as we go through the next kind of series of slides, I'm going to offer up some different things that you can think about. This is to build awareness, just to understand what things sound true to you, sound like, that's something I want to embrace and start to try, or that's something I want to share with someone. So as we move through, just kind of looking at it in that way, with this open perspective, this bigger perspective. So one of the things, I just have titled these Moms Being Moms, right? Treating children differently. So if we have 3 different children in a family and they all have different bodies, and the ideal body is in 2 children, an ideal, when I say that, the ideal body for that family, for their culture, for what they know, if there's 2 that are fitting kind of into that mold, and then a 3rd that's not, that 3rd might be treated differently when it comes to food and eating and food choices. So a couple of examples, right? Why does Sarah get to have dessert and I don't? Mark always gets to have seconds, and why can't I? That's a personal one. Why do I have to eat this and no one else does, right? Maybe a forcing of a particular, a dessert that's a fruit versus, a cookie. So treating children differently. So how can we shift this? What does this look like to shift this? And so here are just a couple of things. So this is where, if you want to, take down some notes, or you want to, get a copy of some of these slides, encouraging yourself or your kids to start to tune into their bodies. That disconnect that we talked about earlier, this disconnect of our own hunger and fullness, get them to understand their own body, their physical needs, as well as their emotional needs. If food has been utilized as a reward for things, there's a comfort that all of us, there's a comfort that's connected to food. And the comfort might be a hug. It might be talking, might be putting on something that's cooler, if you're hot, if you're uncomfortable. So there's a connection, unfortunately, with comfort and food with an emotional want and need. So it's distinguishing between physical and emotional, and then giving children the permission, and yourself permission, to eat or not eat. So if someone does and gets a good grade on something, and you want to celebrate, which I think celebration is wonderful, are there choices for celebration? Does it always have to be around food? Learn to trust yours and your children's inner food compass. I'm hungry. Okay, you're hungry. It's close to dinner. Here, you have a choice between a few of these and a few of these. To understand there's a connection to the hunger. Serve a variety of foods, allowing the children to choose for themselves. They've done studies with 2-year-olds in a whole array of different types of foods, and 2-year-olds that are put in a room, if they've actually already experienced some restriction and it's happened, they tend to go to more of the sweet or salty kind of foods versus the fruits or the vegetable choices, and then other kids go to all of it, right? So it's just interesting to think about. Let's offer lots of different foods without the labels of good or bad. Here's another one: embracing and living the diet mentality and accepting the thin ideal as truth. This is what we're talking about, is if you're in a family of three children, and the ideal and the diet mentality is part of the culture of that family. That's what this is about. And we talked a little bit about this already. A child who is being restricted, who is not getting what their body physiologically needs, starts to develop feelings of shame and guilt, deprivation, frustration, anger, resentment, and often isolation. So it's, I'm not good enough in the body I'm in because I don't fit in to the family ideal. And so there's these other feelings that they develop from this. And food becomes a punishment. Their bodies are not right, so they're punished for that. They're singled out. They might be treated differently, right? And this is where we start to really try to, can we teach children something different here? And this can lead, all of this, the shame, the guilt, the anger, resentment, the punishment can lead to a life of binging or restriction or both, right? It can lead to 90, 100% of thought being consumed with body shape, with body size, with weight. And so that's okay. So taking that in, how can we shift? How can we shift? By neutralizing all foods. The moment that we neutralize foods, certain foods don't have the power that they have had in the past due to experience. This is nobody's fault, right? It's like I've experienced, I get ice cream when I'm good, or ice cream brings me comfort or reduces stress or whatever it is. And so that's kind of a pattern. And if we neutralize it, it doesn't have that power over us as much, right? Educate yourself on the physiological effects of dieting so that you understand that diets don't work. Okay, let's let those go and let's start to, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what can we do instead, right? But neutralizing food, once we know that diets don't work and we can neutralize food and we can reject the diet mentality and the thin ideal, then we actually have space to make room for some more learning and growth and figuring out what works for our bodies. How can I tune into my body? And when I'm hungry, and what am I hungry for? And am I full? When do I get full? What does that sound like? I want to share a story in a minute about this, which I find fascinating. I just heard today. Moms being moms, having a negative body image, speaking poorly and even in a derogatory manner towards your own body shape, weight, or size. I raise my hand, guilty when it comes to this. And so how can we shift this? And the first step is beginning to work on your own relationship with food, beginning to step into your own relationship, understanding that weight does not dictate health. And I think that that's a really big statement to remember. Weight does not dictate health. And beginning to heal your own relationship with food and body so that with that healing, it is modeled to those around you, not only just children, but friends and family, adult friends and family as well, as you heal your own relationship with food in your body. Begin to adopt a mindset that all bodies are special, unique, and worthy. I was just using an example the other day about if you were to line up 20 men and 20 women on one side and 20 men and 20 women on the other side. If they were to look at each other, all of them, and share with you what they found, how they responded to just the physical body, you would get one kind of an answer, and they would be all different. what is beautiful to one person is not always beautiful to someone else, right? We know that. So there's that. And then if there's these 20 people that interacted with these 20 people, there's going to be a whole other set of understanding. And you don't see just the body at this point. You see the person. So there's a first impression body, and it is, do you have a biased body size that's yours, that you believe in? And that's something that can be a really eye-opening. How do you look at other people? How do you judge other people? And then if you're judging other people, then you're beating yourself up as well. You're judging yourself as well. Anytime, the more that we judge others, the more we judge ourselves, right? They go hand in hand. The less we judge others, the less we judge ourselves. So this fact that all bodies are special and unique, no matter what their size, seeing the person and beginning to learn about your own biases. Watch for body checking behavior, a whole other part of this that sometimes is second nature, pinching the waist, pinching the hips, or pulling and tugging on clothes, right? Those are body checking behaviors that are noticed by children. Something's wrong. Like there's something that there's this, it's an underlying feeling of shame, right? That I think happens with our own body checking. So these are not easy. And these things they don't happen overnight. But once we become aware of them and aware that they can affect those around us, we can start to say, okay, well, you know what? I'm not sure I can handle looking at that right now, but I can try to do this. And that's what this webinar is about, is picking and choosing. What things can you start to work on, right? Letting our inner critical voice out for others to hear. So here's again our own self-talk. I'm so fat. I don't want to wear that. I can't wear that. Does this make me look fat? All of those kind of things that our own inner critical voice starts to pick up on. And then others are hearing that too. If there's one step that is key in all of this, it's modeling self-compassion and kindness towards yourself. Once we can start to model kindness to self, it becomes okay for our kids to be kind to themselves as well. I don't think I knew what self-compassion and self-kindness was until just a few years ago, because I'd never heard it. It's foreign. It's not something that was in my wheelhouse or in my circle or in, growing up. I just never heard it. So modeling self-compassion and self-kindness makes it okay for kids to model that too. Encourage. So here's a kind of a movement piece, right? Just understanding that movement, our bodies thrive on it. They love it. As kids, we love to move. Then all of a sudden it became exercise. It became about losing weight, or it became about changing our bodies, or it became about burning calories. So it became, I have to, I should, I need to, versus I want to. It feels good. I love this. It makes me smile. I feel so energized after, right? So completely different language. So understanding and shifting the thought process around movement and exercise. And then noticing how you talk or act when others are around, because they can be misinterpreted by others. So just being more aware of your own self-talk in your home, in your workplace, when you go to, go to an event or go out to dinner, noticing your own behavior and your own self-talk. And then we have one more on moms being moms, commenting or complimenting on other people's weight. Boy, you look great. Have you lost weight? Becomes this standard. Like that's the end all be all compliment Oh, you look great. Have you lost weight? Okay, so if I look great because I lost weight, what did that mean that I looked like before? So watch what your own words are towards others. Wow, you look wonderful. You know, did you see Julie? Isn't it a shame? She must really be struggling. It's a really important piece of this. And this is really hard because it's a pattern, and it's a societal pattern as well. This kind of a compliment. You know, I think about the story of the college kid who goes, the high school kid who goes off to college for the first semester and comes back and has gained, you know, the freshman 15, and that's all people can talk about, not necessarily to the person's face either, right? It's behind the scenes. That's what's important. It's not that they're doing awesome and they made a bunch of friends and they're, you know, they signed up to, you know, for a ping pong team or something like that. Like, those things don't matter. It's all about the weight. And it can go on the flip side too. If they've lost weight, that becomes more important than joining a club or taking a specific class or shifting a major or making some really interesting life choices. So from this, you know, this is something that I've worked really hard with because of my own patterning growing up, you know. So speaking up, if someone else, you know, I use that in quotes, that talks about themselves, change the conversation. You know, if you're talking poorly about yourself, then others feel okay to do the same thing about themselves. So as opposed to if you hear someone, you know, shaming themselves or fat talking about themselves, you know, one of my favorite kind of comebacks is, please don't talk to my friend that way, because they're talking to themselves in a way that they would never talk to you. If you hear other people talking about another person's weight, you know, step in, make a point to let them know we never know what's really going on with people. We should never make assumptions on weight gain or weight loss. There are so many other factors that come in it, and so it's something to make sure that other people understand that it's not a good or a bad thing. It's okay. We can't make assumptions on what's happening with them. You know, what's going on? Are you okay? You know, that's more of a, you know, caring about another person. And then lastly with this is fashion magazines, social media, all of the media that supports the thin ideal. Can you keep it out of the house? Can you take a moment and talk with your child if they're on Instagram and all they're seeing is, or Snapchat, right, is the popular one now. All they're seeing is all of these um, thin ideal, diet culture, diets, keto, whatever. That's all they see. That means that's all that they're putting in their brain. That's all that they're hearing. And can we clean up those social media feeds and really start to influx and flood the house with all different types of bodies, and start the conversations about all of those kind of things. So, you know, isn't it time to stop this cycle and take control of your body and your life and make a difference? And this is a picture of a mother-daughter weekend that we did, and the connection that the moms and the daughters were able to make was pretty amazing, because they began to learn a new language, something that was different, that they could have the same language between the two of them. So I do have a couple of opportunities to share with you, special opportunities to share. So understanding that these shifting and releasing of the old thoughts and behaviors and beliefs is possible. It does help to have some support and guidance along the way. So I've hopefully given you some things to think about today, about what shifts that you can make in the way that you move through your days, what belief systems and behaviors and thoughts that you can start to slowly release and replace with something else. I call that, releasing and replacing. So we're releasing some of the old thoughts and behaviors and beliefs, and we're introducing some new ones. And it does take some time, and it takes some importance. So I just want to offer up that I do a mother-daughter VIP weekend where a mom and a daughter come together. And so we can really do a deep dive with both sets of beliefs, with both sets of patterns, with both sets of stories, and begin to see each other and develop a supportive language around food and eating and body. It can really start to transform a relationship. It can rebuild a relationship. And obviously this is something where both mom and daughter want to take part, or it could be sister and sister, because in families, if there's two sisters that have grown up in a household with these kind of struggles, they both are carrying, I call it rocks in a backpack, right? They're both carrying a bunch of rocks in a backpack with them. Around about weight and food and eating and body image. And so this just allows people to come together, forgive themselves, right? To share with each other, have a safe space to do that. So this is a mother-daughter VIP weekend. If you're interested in that, there will be a link when you get the recording for just a conversation to see if it might be right for you, if this is something that you would like to do. So I wanted to offer that. And if this isn't quite right, isn't quite what you're looking for, and want to do some work on your own, I'm doing some virtual, what I call 3-hour breakthroughs, where you're coming in and this is virtual, so I can do it right here, and we really start to identify the blocks, identify the behaviors and the patterns and the challenges, and we get you unstuck and move towards building a plan. So if you're interested in that, you'll have a link to check that out, or call and talk to me. These are just ways to break through this journey for the last 6 years that I've been on, and I continue to be on it, has freed me from all of the I call it this prison of food and eating and weight. Food is just food for me now. And that's what a freeing concept that is. And then my body just does what I want it to do, and I keep asking it what it wants to do when it comes to movement. So I just wanted to share all of this information with you today. So what I'm really trying to do is create a movement, stop dieting and start living. You can make a difference, and this is the start of the change, one person at a time. So I'm going to keep this open for a few minutes to see if anybody has any questions. Did anything come up that you have any questions about? And then you can head on your way, and we will record. This has been recording, so we'll be, I hope it's been recording. I don't even know if yep, it has. Good. That's interesting. I'm like, oh, shoot, maybe I didn't record it. But that's okay. It has been recording. So I'm going to come back to you live. And any questions from anybody? Thank you again very much for being here, for listening to this. I know I wrote, like I said, I wrote a letter to my daughter saying, hey, sorry, but this is what I know now, and let's talk about it. Because this isn't to be, this isn't a space for people to leave going, oh, what did I do? Because we always do the best that we can with what we know. And now, with knowledge, we can make shifts and changes. So I'm not getting any questions coming in. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say thank you very much for being here. If you get the recording and you think it might be helpful or useful for somebody, please feel free to share it with them. Okay? Thanks again for watching. Have a great Wednesday. Bye-bye.